I came up with the 53 natural senses while after leaving the expedition program and deciding as a hobby, I'd start trying to find ways that the public could do this without being on an expedition. And I came up with these activities. And as I'm going through this, I'm remembering what I'm trying to do is take an activity and have it bring people into an experience we had in the Tetons, or an experience we had up at Wheeler Peak, or an experience we had in these 26 years that I've been living on a bus and living directly in nature, because that's where the bus took us and that's where we lived. So in doing that, I started recognizing the experience was of color, or the experience was the motion of it, or the experience was the music of it, or the experience was and so I just, you couldn't avoid that if you was trying to get into it. And then the National Park Service put me in contact with a book of a guy merchant who had studied and put together a collection of 16 years of going through scientific studies and seeing whether they could identify natural senses. And a lot of them came out of developmental psychology. It wasn't that these senses were known or not known. They'd already been established for the most part, but they were called instincts, drives, needs. The actual sensation itself is never really validated. And therefore, if you don't validate the sensation as being a fact, so that thirst and water are all part of the same thing, and one is no better or worse than the other. One may be momentary, the other may be more stable, but they're still, you don't need thirst if you don't have some kind of liquid, so that sense wouldn't be there. So he came up with 31 natural senses that he listed in his book, and then described how they operated and whatever. And I recognized every bit of that, and I recognized that there was more that I could come up with it from the expeditions. So I called him, and we had two conversations when he was living in Santa Barbara. This is just after the Earth a Living Organism conference. And I asked him where he got that from, and he said that he had actually located 84 or 83 different senses, but in working with the biological labs at Harvard, that they had coalesced them into 31, and that's what so I uncoalesced them and also discovered a couple that weren't even in the collection. And then I started saying, well, any experience I have, what's playing, and start looking for that sense, and I could find it. And I was doing it enough so I could say that at least 53 of all. There may be, in terms of sensitivities or attraction sensitivities, there might be 500 or 1,000 out there, but what we need to survive and to be in our consciousness that I could find that we are given is these 53. They don't count senses of ultraviolet light, which you can't sense, or other kinds of senses of higher frequencies that the dog could hear. We're not doing that. But I found 53 that were working on the expedition, working with me in doing this, and with workshops. And so that's where the number came from, one of those senses being consciousness, which then allowed the other senses to come into awareness. So that's how the 53 came in. And I didn't do the research on them. Each one of them has been documented in one way or another in scientific work, some showing that you take a colony of bacteria and that colony has a certain shape, and then you starve that colony, and the shape of it changes into 4 other natural shapes. But in order for that to happen in a bacteria, it means there's a genetic change that has to take place in all those bacteria that actually start expressing the colony that way. So just the sensation of a desire for food, attraction for food, can change the way a colony or even a single bacterium is able to operate. Well, if you think about that, we're just full of all of these cells and bacteria and the rest of it. So on that level, contact with nature is able to touch these senses. And now they're first coming out, just recent studies, that people, when they're close to nature, there's a chemistry that the body picks up, and it's smelling and turning on what everyone's experienced if they've had a good experience in nature. And so if you have a contact with that, automatically it's taking place, just like automatically spending some quiet time in nature. All of a sudden there are changes going on in our mentality where you feel calmer, you feel more collected, you feel more grounded. You didn't do anything. You just get the exposure and it knows what to do. So we have moments of that, and we call it recreation because it's fun, and I call it recreation because that's what it's doing. But we just have moments. Once you leave those moments, half a day later, 15 minutes later, it's all gone. And because we seek it, we'll go to the movies. We'll stimulate those same things again, but it's stimulated artificially. It connects with the real thing. All of the value and balance and integrity of the real thing is part of the answer you're getting. If you're getting it from the movie, you're getting it from the movie house, you're getting it from the industry, from the money, from the wilderness that isn't there anymore, has been replaced by the theater.